Hello and welcome to the Royal College of Pathologists Continuous Quality Improvement Awareness Month webinar series. My name is Maya Laxdal and I'm excited to be hosting these sessions where we have leading experts guide us through key CQI methodologies and skills for making change and improving patient care and safety. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Nadeem Moghal. Nadeem trained as a pediatric nephrologist and is currently the clinical director for innovative learning at RCPath, where he is testing a model to overcome resistance to report error and harm, a key source for learning and improvement. So without any further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming Nadeem Moghal. Nadeem, over to you.
Thank you, Maya. I'd like to just start by addressing management fads. You see a list before you, which are approaches and efforts people have made in organizations to improve work. They're not all fads, but they're certainly seen by staff sometimes as fads that come and go. And I'd like to address this in their proper context. So, why so many fads? Well, management consultancies come to sell their solutions to your problems. And they will come to you with some of the evidence that has been proven to work, but they have in effect codified this evidence into a method that they describe as theirs in order to prove their value. They rarely sell a method that includes all that has been evidenced and which has been proven to make a significant difference to the quality of work and actually is quality improvement as a method. So, how is it usually done in healthcare organizations? Somebody somewhere will define a problem, and people will be brought together, say, let's call it a committee, and it'll be full of really bright and interested individuals who will work through the problem, define the options, and eventually set a policy. And that policy will describe how staff are supposed to deliver the way of working. Somebody will assume that this change has been implemented, and one hopes, but not always, a audit will be undertaken to determine whether the policy and the plan is actually being done. So, how does this feel? It really feels like a top-down organization where edicts are sent down to staff to be told what to do, and the staff really genuinely then have no sense of ownership of the change in their work, and you end up with disengaged staff. So if what I've just described isn't working for the staff that do the work day in, day out, how does one engage the individual and the team, not only with their work, but actually how to improve their work? How do they engage with the constructs of quality improvement to own the work and improve the work? But I mentioned audit earlier on, and I think we need to talk about audit. Now, I'm really clear about the value of audit. It's important, it is a necessary construct, but the way we currently use it in healthcare is a problem. And there is evidence to show, published evidence by the Cochrane Group in 2010, that actually audit is failing in many ways to deliver on the intended improvements that the findings show through the process of audit. And my experience, certainly in different organizations and different services in the NHS, is that it is very common for somebody to take a standard policy and measure it through the audit tool. When they've measured it, they identify gaps, which is, of course, the aim of the process. And when the gaps are identified, you then find what I would describe as a very standard end slide to any presentation on audit, which is a set of recommendations that are about we need to improve, we need to educate, we need to better communicate. But what is often missing is the bit of work that needs to be done that is in the construct that is separate from audit, that is called quality improvement. So audit is important, but as we use it currently, it doesn't quite deliver on the ambition of improvement because people aren't applying quality improvement science. So I'd like to start with a little bit of historical background and just focus on the evidence for continuous quality improvement science. I think that we need to know that the fathers that defined quality improvement science, particularly on the basis of statistical science, people like Duran and Stewart, need to be noted. And my favorite in all of this, of course, is W. Edwards Deming, who not only combined his knowledge of process and statistical science, but then also combined other aspects, which are the real challenges of change, in order to affect improvement in systems, processes, and ultimately in organizations, be they manufacturing or service industries. And of course, the world of healthcare is both a combination of production of goods, but also a provider of service. Let me talk about the system of profound knowledge. This is what Deming describes as the approach to being able to have a chance at successful quality improvement. He brought together four key component parts, and it's not that you can choose one or two and then assume that you're going to succeed. And that's kind of one of the challenges that some management consultants bring to the table. They'll bring one or two aspects and say, this is how your solutions will be solved. It's all of this. It is having to understand the system, appreciating the system, and then understanding the variation that exists within the system, and that requires the application of statistical tools and particular types of charts that are referred to as statistical process control charts and run charts. And then, of course, understanding what are the theories that are being applied to understand the systems and what theories of knowledge need to be applied and can be applied for the change. But of course, there is this other bit, this rather important, equally important bit, which is the psychology of change. And in my mind's eye, this describes the many, many bookshelves filled with all sorts of aspects around leadership and the human condition. So what you see before you here is what Deming did really very cleverly, was to combine statistical science with social science. What you've got ahead of you now are two videos, courtesy of the Institute of Healthcare Improvement in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Both videos effectively add a little bit more as way of explanation to the system of profound knowledge. I think they're worth watching, and then we can follow through to the other aspects of continuous quality improvement. I'm going to arguably state the obvious, why quality improvement matters. Uh, of course it matters, but it's slightly more significant to understand the healthcare context. Having worked in healthcare as well as understood other industries through other opportunities, healthcare is more of a complex adaptive system than most. You can work in a clinic on a Monday morning and find that when you're back the following Monday, actually things are significantly different, regardless of the physical environment, because of the human condition and because the way systems aren't really as embedded as one might expect in a production system. The other thing to remember, of course, is that the people that are doing the work are the ones that will fundamentally come to sustainable solutions. And that actually no leader, manager, or single person, even within the team, has the answer that would solve whatever problem you're trying to fix or whatever it is you're trying to improve. And the key learning I have on this is that it is always the issue of how to that is the gap in the skill sets of staff that want to improve their work. So I would answer that by saying the how to is in fact the science of quality improvement. And going back to the approach to finding solutions to problems or certainly just simply improving the work one does, I think it's important that one takes and uses the lens of system profound knowledge that I've just worked through, along with those two videos that you've watched. And whatever it is that is being tested, one has to be honest about the potential outcome. It may work, it may fail, or it may just need adapting as a change for improvement. To share some key narratives which are well understood in the world of quality improvement. The first is that not all change is improvement, but all improvement is, of course, change. The second is that improvement should always be about learning. And that's, I think, a key deficit in people's understanding and certainly organizations' challenges. I always have believed that a successful organization has to be rooted in learning, and actually the process of improvement should also be rooted in learning, which engages staff more powerfully. Uh, it's really important to learn from success and failure.
my own experience is that it is really very hard to learn from success and actually easier to learn from why something has failed or hasn't worked. In any case, I think it's important that teams and organizations embed a system to be able to extract the learning. Model for improvement. I believe this is a really critical model if one is going to be approaching anything related to quality improvement in work. It will be unlikely that you will start, as most people do, with the top half of the model because most people know the bottom half. They know the plan, do, study, act cycle, the PDSA cycle. It seems to be ubiquitous, and it seems to be that quite often people simply use that part of the model for improvement as the way to achieve the improvement. And we know that that guarantees failure. It's the whole model. So you start at the beginning and ask the question, what is the aim? So if you've identified the problem or the area you wish to improve, the question you have to ask yourself is, what is the aim? What are we trying to accomplish? What is the end point? What is the change proportion that you're trying to get to? The second is, how will you know that a change is an improvement? And that fundamentally is the measures you're going to have to put into place effectively to measure that what you're trying to change is happening. It's measurable. How you do that will vary from project to project, but aspects like statistical process charts and run charts, i.e. data used in statistical sense, will begin to tell you that improvement is happening. And that's a whole other video blog. And the third stage to this is, what is the change idea? What change can you make that will result in improvement? What is it you're going to do? What's the process step change or the process step changes? What are you going to add or remove that will lead to the achievement of the aim? So the model is the whole thing and really critical to be used as a whole uh, model rather than just an aspect of it, which is another thing that I've seen teams do and therefore ultimately fail. The video slide shows a link where there's more detail to the model, and there is plenty other literature that describes how to use it well. So we talked about the model for improvement, but I'm bringing back the theory of profound knowledge because they're linked. So if you are going to address a problem or you want to improve some aspect of your work, you're going to have to start by understanding the system that you're trying to affect change in. You're going to have to collect data from that system and understand the variation within that system that you want to affect change in. You're going to have to apply all that you know about the human condition, that is the psychology of change, with your colleagues. That can be the potentially biggest barrier to achieving that improvement. And of course, applying theories of knowledge about what you're trying to achieve. That is an important first approach to your quality improvement. You can then, I would argue, more successfully then apply the model for improvement. There's lots of literature on quality improvement science. And before you is just one textbook that I have on my bookshelf, which I think is really very good. It's a really good entry level to then begin to understand a lot of what I have actually shared with you through this video blog. Just a brief reminder before we move on that change is actually really very challenging. It is always messy. It is never linear because we are in systems that are extraordinarily complex. Complex adaptive is what it is in healthcare. We mustn't forget that it is also psychologically very hard, both for the individual trying to make the change, but also working with colleagues. The human condition comes into play, and actually there's a lot of literature that explains why it's psychologically difficult. And the other aspect is that we live in a world where entropy is the norm. So we are working to work against entropy, but also actually improve what we're trying to do. And then ultimately, of course, it's actually very exhausting. It's time consuming, it's physically exhausting, and psychologically exhausting. So if it was easy, we wouldn't be having this video blog. And another thing, I appreciate the Royal College of Pathologists is a mix of 17 disciplines, and doctors are only part of it. I've led change over many years in healthcare, and my experience is, and there are many good reasons for this and many not so good reasons for it, doctors ultimately are the most resistant to change in healthcare. And I know those that work with doctors will recognize what I'm saying. This is my quote, and you're free to use it. It seems that doctors are trained to find problems to solutions. That's not to say we can't get over them, but be mindful of these challenges. So I've talked about the system of profound knowledge and why that's an important first step to then applying the model for improvement. But there's something I'd like to share that brings in an aspect of everyday work and frameworks that people use in medicine and science. Look at the medical scientific method on your left. Let's just go through that a bit. So as a doctor or somebody that's interested in addressing a problem that a patient has brought to you, we start by taking a history and undertaking a physical examination. That's effectively taking and collecting data. We then undertake a number of tests, and they all generate data. We take all of this data to then understand what the system is that is generating this information, the system being the patient, and then we set out some theories about what we think might be going on. In medicine, we call it a differential diagnosis. We then, through a process of bringing this data together, reach a diagnosis typically. We then work this through with the patient through a process called shared decision making about what to do to address whatever the issues are that have been identified, the problem that we need to improve. We then establish a treatment plan and we implement that treatment plan, hoping that that change we're going to put into the patient is going to improve the state of the patient. But we also ensure that we monitor what we've done. So we monitor by bringing the patient back into a clinic or by repeating tests and collecting more data. So the medical scientific method is about understanding and appreciating the person in the whole, understanding the variation that the patient is bringing to you by collecting data, and then using that to apply some theories of knowledge, but also understanding the psychology of the issues and the person in front of us, the shared decision making. What are we actually going to do and how are we going to do it before we actually go down to implement the change? So what are we trying to accomplish? An improvement in the health of the individual. How are we going to know that's an improvement? Because we have a set of measures that may be both history taking as well as testing. And then how we know that's an improvement? Because we have a set an outcome in that relationship. What do? We plan the treatment, we do the treatment, we study the treatment, and then we act on whatever we find. We adapt the change or we abandon the treatment because it didn't work. So in fact, if you look at these three component bits, but certainly if you look at the medical scientific method and the approach to quality improvement, I find it very difficult as a doctor and or a scientist as to what really is the difference. And if we accept that there really is no difference in our approach, then actually the science of quality improvement, with a slight difference of different statistical methodology, should be a natural for those of us that have been trained in the medical scientific method. Have a look at this very short video that actually shows the messiness of improvement in a clinical setting and on a ward. So a quick reminder of a previous slide, how improvement is usually done in healthcare badly. It's top-down edicts with no sense of ownership at the staff level, who then become disengaged. So how should it be done is illustrated here, where on your right you'll see the application of what we've talked about, which is the system of profound knowledge and the model for improvement. And I've included audit because it's a really critically important substrate for identifying opportunities for improvement. And the change is actually illustrated in this slide on the left, where you end up with staff effectively from the bottom up using a method for improvement which is rooted in learning. Staff are empowered and engaged. To summarize, Quality improvement is a science. It's a combination of statistical science and social science. It is key to maximizing your domain expertise, whether you're a pathologist or a scientist. If you don't have these skills, you're really expensively acquired. Other skills, I would argue, are not optimally used. Your work is then improved by you and your team, and you're not being told how to do it. And that these quality improvement skills are as important, I would argue, as your scientific and clinical skills. And it is, of course, only when you're applying quality improvement to your work every day that one can use the term continuous quality improvement.
Thank you to Dr. Moghal for this fascinating presentation, and thank you for watching. For more information on everything that's happening during CQI Awareness Month, go to rcpath.org/CQIaware. Remember to tune in on Thursday, the 9th of May, for a podcast with Professor Sebastian Lucas, where he discusses the importance of quality and improvement in non-forensic autopsy services. This webinar was developed by the Clinical Effectiveness Department of the Royal College of Pathologists. This webinar was hosted by Maya Laxdal, recorded by Kate Stewart, and directed by Maria Marrero Feo. Thank you for watching.